The latest propaganda card played by the Remain in the EU establishment camp was of George Osborne calling on his good buddy Jamie Dimon, the head of JP Morgan, to come to Britain and do his very best to scare the British people into voting to remain within the EU on June 23rd, as being in the best interest of the British establishment who own Britain. So, Jamie acted out the role of being the fourth horseman of the Brexit financial apocalypse that would see Britain's financial sector evaporate. Though maybe not on par with the last financial apocalypse that the likes of JP Morgan helped bring about in 2008, that saw the world's governments blackmailed into bailing out the banks to the tune of trillions of dollars, where even little old Blighty was forced to cough up over £500 billion to bail out Britain's banks, and then had the £4 trillion noose of banking sector liabilities put around the necks of the British taxpayer, or else face financial armageddon. So what Jamie Dimon actually threatened was that JP Morgan alone could relocate up to 4,000 bankers to Europe following a Brexit outcome, so that there's no illusion of the magnitude of the hole that the bankster elite had dug not just Britain into, but had the whole world teetering on the edge of financial collapse, as the following video illustrates of just how close the US financial system came towards total collapse. At 2 minutes 20 seconds into the C-SPAN video clip, Republican Paul Kanjorski of Pennsylvania in February 2009 explained how the Federal Reserve told Congress members about a, quote, tremendous drawdown of money market accounts in the United States to the tune of $550 billion, and according to Kanjorski, this electronic transfer occurred over a period of an hour and threatened a further $5 trillion to be drawn out, triggering a total collapse of the financial system, which then prompted Hank Paulson's emergency $700 billion TARP bailout action. So Jamie's back in the UK trying to scare the British people, because one thing the likes of JP Morgan are good at is blowing up financial systems by blowing themselves up, effectively suicide banks. In which respect, every major British bank in 2008 was a suicide bank, threatening to blow up and take the financial system down with them if they were not bailed out by the British taxpayer. But they were not done with us yet, for within a couple of years they were back with a new bailout story that are further perpetual bailouts under the threats of blowing the Eurozone apart. It was JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs that cooked the Eurozone's books so that countries such as Greece could hide their debts and go on a debt-fueled decade-long spending spree. And now, 8 years on, the Eurozone remains in a permanent state of crisis, with Greece, whilst quiet in the mainstream press headlines, is nevertheless once more teetering on the edge of financial collapse, demanding perpetual EU bailouts brokered by the likes of JP Morgan. And there is a reason why the Eurozone crisis is permanent, because it is in the German elite's interests for a Eurozone to remain in economic depression, which means both low inflation and a weak euro that allows Germany's megacorps to export to not just across the Eurozone's captured market and the wider EU, but the whole world, that the German elite profits from to the tune of over 400 billion euros per year. Therefore, the Eurozone crisis will never be solved, of which the last 8 years illustrates is permanent, as Germany's elites continue to centralise control over the European Union via unelected ECP and Brussels bureaucrats. The EU referendum brings home the point that democracy, as we've known it since the last referendum in 1974, has been an illusion. We vote for those whom the banking and business elite, the establishment, seek to put into power so that ordinary people continue to have no real control or say, so that the elite can continue to own Britain, whilst individual MPs always tend to toe the party line, which is why nothing changes in favour of the British people, who are mere slaves to those that have owned Britain for centuries, and thus why the people suffer the consequences of the likes of out of control immigration that only benefits the establishment elite through cheap labour willing to work for less pay and undermining job security and working conditions so that the owners of Britain can better control Britain's indebted wage slaves. Therefore, the EU referendum is a once in a 50-year chance for the British people to take back control from the faceless, unelected and unaccountable EU bureaucrats whom the British people can never vote out of office, to take back control from the elite who own Britain and their vested interests, such as the politicians whose agendas are always contrary to that of the British people, such as the banksters wanting to lax banking regulations, big business that wants cheap labour and does not give a toss about the consequences of importing 6 million EU workers willing to work for literally peanuts, destroying communities the length and breadth of Britain, all of which they are immune to from within their gated communities and private healthcare schemes. The bottom line is that June the 23rd is not just about voting to leave the EU, but is a vote for freedom. The first time in near 50 years that the people of Britain had had a real chance to vote against the establishment, as every general election has been an illusion of choice. There has been no choice. Democracy in Britain has been an illusion, a mechanism for the elite to keep Britain's wage slaves sedated whilst they continue to grab an ever greater share of the nation's wealth, which is why the establishment are now going for broke with Operation Fear, attempting to scare the people of Britain into voting to remain as obedient wage slaves to their slave masters. June 23rd will be the start of a British Revolution. Leave is just the beginning, and the elite that own Britain know that. So vote for freedom starting June 23rd. There's now less than 3 weeks to go, and with the opinion polls neck and neck on 45%, it's a case of now or never, the final push to secure freedom for the British people. So we here at the Market Oracle have ramped up our Brexit campaign, producing Brexit resources from in-depth analysis, rebuttal articles and many videos, and also active on the social networks so as to do our part in securing Britain's long-term future, Britain's very last chance for freedom, which you too can help to achieve by supporting our Brexit campaign.